Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
I'm Ben Matlock.
And we're here.
And as soon as we're ready to go, I instinctively grabbed my phone to start ignoring my responsibilities.
I don't blame you one bit. You're like, yeah, I got to talk to Steve for now. Let's see what's going on Twitter.
It's not even that. Like we have the whole basis of this show is we have interesting conversations. It's just I don't care. I would rather be like, wait, Biden did what? You know, and then it takes me a moment to remember, you know what? This actually isn't any more interesting than the thing I'm trying to distract myself from. It's that thing where it's like, I'll go onto Twitter, and everybody has done something like this, but I'll go onto Twitter on my desktop, and then I'll pull it up on my phone to distract myself from Twitter on my desktop.
It was either this morning or yesterday morning. I went half a day at work and then realized I had two separate, I use Chrome at work. I had two separate Chrome windows open, both on Twitter.
Yeah.
Not two different tabs, but two completely different, instances of the application. And it's
which only looks like you're hiding some shit when you're at work. It's like, why else would he have two browser tabs?
Anyway.
Yeah.
If you're new to the show's normally about, just us telling random interesting stories. Sometimes it's real stuff. Sometimes it's fake stuff. Ghost stories, murder stories.
Con men.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly fall into
stories.
Right.
Usually shit going wrong on some level, whether it's human nature or just a terrible situation for people.
Right. Either people that are terrible people or people that are good people that have terrible things happen to them. They're it's not usually an uplifting show.
Yeah, the most uplifting I think we was that one woman who was incredibly unlucky and fucking pulled down Mr. Rogers' pants. and that was wow, that's a lighthearted romp. And Mr. Rogers was that kind of sucks.
She got her scalp ripped off by a bat, and her neighbors basically were just oh shit, that's scary. But
oh shit, Big Raj. Now everyone knows what he looks like. But yeah, this week I could not get anything together. We talked about it off air, but I figured it would be a good chance, since we were planning to write our own horror stories for episode 50, to get myself kind of in the creative mindset of what we're going for with, because we've done a few creepypastas before, and we're going back to that today, but I feel like I kind of started strong with the creepypasta stories I've done so far, because it started with the Ronald McDonald House, which was just a classic as far as what an ending, huh? Gripping.
Yeah, see, I didn't even know about the world of creepypasta until that episode. And so far my impression of it is just they're horror stories that are also terrible. And again, not terrible we hit terrible with every topic, but this is not terrible it's so gross or just they're bad.
Some of them are, they definitely try to go in for descriptive gore and stuff, but they are bad. The running theme is they're either bad ideas or good ideas but just not communicated well. And I always
they're B-movie horror stories.
Yeah, and I always try to preface it with this is laughing with writers. It's not to make people feel shitty about we're bashing them because they wrote a bad thing. Because I say every time I do this, if you haven't written a bad thing in your life, you haven't written anything.
Right. And if you think we're just giving lip service to that idea, in a couple episodes we plan on writing our own original creepypastas
and then giving it to each other. And we're going to just tear each other apart, so we'll never write anything again. But like I said, the first few stories I've done of this on this show, they definitely were creepypasta to their core as far as those ideas, but I do feel like they were distinct. So you had the Ronald McDonald House, you had a Trapu Espiritu, it was the guide to survive a monster coming after you when you're trying to sleep, and how you basically just never open your eyes. These were pretty unique stories, and the one I found today is not as, like, this is more true to what most creepypastas are, I think, in the sense that they're always trying to go for some, like, sort of dark, edgy, like, look how fucking unnerving I made my main character type shit. But the quality of the writing is still right where we need it to be to do this show.
Can't wait.
So all I know about this one is it's written by somebody who titled author named himself OC. So Orange County wrote this story. Yeah,
the whole county.
The whole county got together and wrote this story titled My Memories. It's been about 6 years since I've been to my Aunt Judith's. Until now, I haven't talked about her, my family, or the things that have happened in her house. I've been running away from the past, but feel like it's time to tell the truth, or at least admit it to myself what really happened there. I'm scribbling all of this down on a few sheets of paper the waitress at the local diner gave me, which is like, yeah, anywhere you can get office supplies.
Yeah, I want to... I hate fucking asking for, like, an alteration to a meal. Like, it's like, I want this buffalo chicken burger, but I don't like pickles, but I'm not going to ask to not have... I can't imagine asking a waitress, be like, do you have some paper?
Do you have college-ruled notebook? Like,
a fountain pen would be nice.
Yeah, and can I take your one pen that you need to fill orders? It's 2 a.m., so I'm the only customer here. It's raining heavily outside, and I'm in a hurry. I have a job interview at 7 in the morning sharp at Burger King, thanks to my friend Denise, which is 5 hours, so I don't...
Yeah, it's 3 states over, though, Ben.
Yeah, okay. And the way he said it, like, sharp, and you don't want to be late for that Burger King interview. Not that I was begging for the job anyways. Like I said, I'm in a hurry, so I'll begin with that summer. Shit, and then he just interrupts it with these weird thoughts, like, shit, my coffee is already cold. Like, you don't need to write that down.
No, I love that idea. When I do finally convince myself to write a novel, I'm just going to interject things actually happening to me, the writer, as I'm writing the novel.
Shit, nose is running. Hang on. And then write out the, like, sound of you blowing your nose. I'll be writing this down by memory or whatever my mind has been telling me these years, which is another way of saying memory. I turned 12 that summer, and Aunt Judith insisted me and my family went to her house for a few weeks because she bought a new boat for the river nearby her house. She lives in Alabama. It wasn't uncommon to own a small boat similar to the one you see in The Rescuers. I loathed Aunt Judith, so I remember imagining the boat to look like the one from that movie. I don't know how those thoughts are connected.
He just likes boats and movies, man.
But hates Aunt Judith, and somehow they're tied together. And as I stayed there, the little animals would save me from my boring family. It wasn't a rare dream I'd have. I hated them. Why I hate them? When I was 5, we moved to Kentucky out of Alabama from Aunt Judith's because my dad's job required it, and frankly, we needed the money. I urged my parents to let me stay with Aunt Judith instead. I'd rather stay with her and be with my friends than in an entirely different state with strangers. It didn't work. We moved to a small town I don't remember the name of, and I was immediately entered into a kindergarten class. That was where all the trouble began. This stupid kid Ricky was always playing and messing with me, and we'd all think it was all good and fun until one day he wasn't playing with me anymore. We were on the swings and he started pulling my hair and pushing my face into a mud puddle. I screamed and thrashed, but the teacher went out on a smoke break. I want to imagine it was like right at that moment. The teacher's like all right, I'll leave you two to it.
The teacher, they're outside playing, and then the teacher had to go out on a smoke. Like, I got to go more out on a smoke break.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, and I remember when I was a kid, you had like 3 teachers. Like, you felt like you were in like a prison.
I was going to say, maybe the problem is just I grew up in the wonderful like 80s where teachers would just like be smoking in the classroom, basically. So
3 lucky strikes plus 4 equals what, kids? An entire pack. Somehow I got away from Ricky and ran up the playground steps. I remember my shoes were untied that day because I hadn't learned how to tie them yet, And next thing I heard was a small yell from Ricky as I felt his shoe step on my shoestring, preventing me from moving forward and almost tripping. And that's when I see him fall backwards from me. I reach for him as he falls, but it was too late. His head thumps the hard concrete below the playground, and I see blood coming from the back of his head. All of the other kids form a circle around Ricky, and I stand there staring at the puddle of blood forming on the cement. Almost a minute goes by of kids wondering what to do, staring in amazement and wonder of what's happening, and one girl with a braided ponytail, and I remember to be mute, runs for the teacher. The teacher returns with the same girl tugging and pulling at the end of her shirt, rushing her to the playground until the teacher sees the circle and starts running. Long story short, I was accused for murder and almost put on trial.
That's those 5-year-old trials.
Yeah. This is like such a not understanding of how the legal system works, and it's really hard to piece it together because it's structured really weird. Mm-hmm. A few of the kids there claimed to see me with my arms outstretched to Ricky as he fell, but I had nothing to counter-argue it. They were outstretched. I didn't know what to say. My parents believed them, the parents of Ricky believed them too, and obviously put me on trial. Obviously.
The judge, who was a cat.
The rescuer. The jury said I was guilty and sent me to a foster home where I lived for nearly 7 years until a few weeks before my 11th birthday. The jury said he was guilty of murder.
And
when a kid accidentally fell off some steps.
And the punishment for that, though, is that we're going to put you in a foster home.
Again, yeah. This is... Yeah.
I like it. I'm for it. I think there's a lot of fucking children out there today that should go on trial.
And then just end up in foster care.
Yeah.
The reason they released me was because I was, quote, showing signs of significant improvement and my parents attended a few parenting classes. That'll do it. That'll get you off murder.
Child murder, yeah.
It was because no one would adopt me and no one wanted me there. Until that day of my release, my parents haven't talked to me in all those years. They believed every word they said about me. I'm a demon child, a murderer. They were ashamed of me, but still they helped release me for reasons I'm still not sure about and wish I could find out. Plot hole.
I also love the idea that a kid pushing another kid is like, that's a demon child. Like, obviously, if you push a kid down and they hit their head,
yeah,
like that's
that's just proof that, if anything, the kid is a slayer of demons.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like he's trying to go for, what's that, like the Good Son or whatever that horror movie is, where the kid really is like,
yeah,
there's a lot of
Elijah
movies like
Wood
that, but
and Macaulay Culkin,
yeah,
and everybody's like, man, Macaulay Culkin sucks. He better not kill that dog.
So it sounds like he's trying to paint that, but he's doing it with like we got in a fight at the playground.
Yeah.
And I'm a murderer now.
Yeah, so it was, like an accidental thing, but everybody's like, you killed him. So again, back to the few weeks of my time at Aunt Judith's. As soon as I arrived in her yard, I smelled the familiar smell of alcohol and molasses. Yum.
Alcolassus.
It was always strong, even when I was younger. I know it's been years since I've been there, and when I say young, I mean 1 to 5. I have a remarkable memory. It's so well I almost remember being birthed. That is a weird sentence. Although you might think it being helpful, say, during exams or quizzes, my memories always have haunted me. I have an inability to forget them, or at least blur them. Imagine reliving all of your failures and regrets word for word every night. It's a nightmare.
That's called being a human.
Yeah,
shit.
I wrote that, actually.
I wake up in cold sweats over things that I said, like, in high school that made me feel stupid.
Yeah, I cringe, anytime it's like, well, that could look like a pee stain. I know it's not one, but it could look like one. And
I hate to tell you this, but these, like, literary devices of repressed memories, I think that's all made up. Like, I do forget everything. I forget, like, what I don't know. I almost forget my own name, but all the horrible things that happen in your life, yeah, they stick around.
I forget my
ever.
fucking debit card PIN number constantly. But I will always remember the look on some girl's face when I made a fucking terrible joke and it didn't land. And
Right.
you know, you only remember what's important. But he is right, it's a nightmare. Again, I go back to Judith's old house that smelled of alcohol and molasses. She greeted me with a solid greeting, and that's a fucking great sentence. She greeted me with a solid greeting and a seemingly warm hug.
Yeah, that's pretty solid.
As well as my parents, when we entered her house, I found a surprise. Clocks. At least hundreds of clocks, each different size, shape, and color, each ticking its own unique tick-tock. It overwhelmed me at first, and she explained to us that it was her newest hobby, making German-style clocks. She tells us of this nice man who lives in a small hut or shack down the road who buys a few off her to decorate his house, and the way she describes him, it sounds like she has a crush on him. We sat down for dinner, questionable spaghetti. That's a great rap name. Questionable spaghetti, and some sort of stale bread. I shoved it down my throat, avoiding my tongue for the this guy is weird, and excused myself for the bathroom. Even in the bathroom, she had clocks, watching me use the toilet and splash cold water on my face. It was the first day I've seen my parents in years, and they have barely talked to me that day, along with Aunt Judith.
We probably can't hear each other over the ticking of all these clocks.
Yeah. I was a little nervous and felt a little alone despite being with my family. I returned to them and discovered they had finished their meals surprisingly faster than I would imagine in the short amount of time I was resided to the bathroom. They suggested we go on Judith's new boat on the river. Before we left for the boat, the man Judith was telling us about came to visit. He said Judith talked a lot about our family and said it was the first time we've come to Alabama in a while, and he came to greet us. What struck me first about him was his appearance. He had long brown straggly hair that looks like it hasn't been washed in months. His teeth were brown and yellow, wearing away, and a couple looked like they were missing. His clothes looked as if he was homeless, and his breath stank of meat.
So basically, you're describing an Alabama.
Yeah,
an Alabaman.
Yeah, Alabama after dinner. That was a very common person in the South.
And there go all of our listeners from an entire state.
That's okay. You can join everyone else who left us. Otherwise, he was more inviting and welcoming than my family. He said hello for a few minutes and ran off to his house to check on his stove. Like, oh shit, it's burning down. Then we boarded Judith's new boat. I remember the boat weaving through the giant clumps of trees and grass. The moss and algae were disgusting. The entire swamp looked as if it was infected with a disease. Not one time on that trip did I see an animal either swimming through the water or a bug swarming around the grass.
Well, that's a blessing if you're in a swamp. Like,
Yeah.
Does this kid know what a swamp is?
The swamp is full of everything.
Right. I mean, and it's like, oh, this swamp is disgusting. No shit, it's a swamp.
Yeah. I think his thing was like earlier, like his family tried to tell him it's a river, and he's like, it's it's really just a hellhole. But still, there's tons of bugs in swamps. So I was suspicious of how healthy and safe it was to be going through this water. Minutes passed and then hours. I was tired and bored of the swamp and becoming increasingly scared to be out there in the dark. I insisted to Aunt Judith, an owner of the vehicle for only a couple days now, that it wasn't safe for us to be driving it at night. She disagreed, and deeper we went into the swamp. None of us have spoken for nearly hours. You have to feel like they're gonna kill you. Right?
Right.
Like, you're out on this boat in the dark at night for hours and no one's talking to you. You're gonna get hit. And I could tell even my parents were getting nervous. My mother twiddled her thumbs and my father removed his hat and twisted it for relief. I caught him staring at me for a couple minutes and looked almost guilty, or was it ashamed still? Aunt Judith kept driving the odd boat through the swamp for about 15 minutes until we reached a small little sandbar, or island about the size of Judith's house. I was curious why she would have spent all this time driving us out here for a little sandbar when I realized what was happening. Judith helped me out of the boat, and my mother and father too. I looked around the small island when behind a bush I saw one massive hole buried deep in the sandbar. I should say I haven't read all of this. So when I joked that they're gonna kill him, I didn't know. I saw one massive hole buried deep in the sandbar. So deep it looked like water was rising up out of the earth, looking muddy and black.
Well, I mean, I get that if I dig more than 6 inches, so...
Yeah.
It's called a water table, kid. Learn about it.
It's called a water hole. It's common in the South. We drink from it. There was a wet shovel halfway buried right next to it. I knew then I wasn't jumping to conclusions. It was my fresh grave. I calmly assessed the situation.
So if they had dug it with like a spoon, then you're like, oh, cool, everything's normal.
He sees his grave and he calmly assesses the situation. We got James Bond here. And what I was able to do. I remembered I had a couple of knives one of my only friends gave me at the Foster's home. A janitor working there. So a janitor just gave this kid some knives.
Hey, kid, I hear you
after being
for murder.
Convicted.
Would you like some knives?
After being convicted for murder, a janitor's like, you're going to need these. He said if I ever needed to protect myself, I would be able to with a knife or two. I left one in my suitcase from the drive, but I kept one on me at all times. They always came in handy for opening packages or cutting a tie, but this time I wouldn't be cutting a tie. Yeah,
I'd be cutting family ties.
Yeah, that would have been better if he wrote that. Instead, he just left it at wouldn't be cutting a tie. My father slowly approached me from behind and talked in a slow, soothing voice. Samantha, don't be afraid now. Daddy's only here to make sure you're okay. His voice trembled as he said the unforgiving words, and as he said I whipped out my pocket knife. It was the bigger one of the two, thank goodness. Samantha, don't do anything rash, darling.
I like how just calm this whole family is.
Yeah, I was like, now you settle down.
We're going to kill you. Oh, you've got a knife. Don't do anything.
You settle down and you get in that hole. Don't do anything rash, darling, he said again. Only I wasn't focusing on his words. I was focusing on his actions. Yeah, at this point, remember, he hasn't done anything except be calm down.
He was twisting his hat menacingly, apparently.
That's true. Only I wasn't focusing on his words. I was focusing on his actions. His hand slowly brushed his side, and my instincts kicked in from watching so many crime shows. I slowly walked forwards to him, watching his every movement, his chest rise and fall. I pointed the knife towards him in a defensive position. Don't reach for that gun, I warned. This is weird. What? I cut him off. Don't bullshit me. I know you're reaching for it. I want you to pull it out slowly and drop it on the ground. Go ahead. So this is what I was kind of talking about. Like, this is more in line with like a lot of what like creepypastas are, where it's like the authors always kind of write themselves into the story, which a lot of writers do, but they always try to like make themselves like these real like no nonsense badass heroes that like it always comes across really forced. Yeah. And shit, and that is more likely what you're going to find in most creepypastas. I pursued in being defensive, watching him pull out his small hand pistol and placing it on the ground, raising his hands. Again, she has a knife. So
well, yeah, I almost said something there. I'll just give this author some credit because we've been laughing about so much stuff. When you're in close quarters, a knife's actually better than a gun.
Sure.
But that's assuming you know how to use the knife. And that's assuming the person with the gun is going to understand that and put the gun down and not try to fucking shoot you anyway.
But also, like they're on this sandbar, I feel like there would be enough distance there for him to just pull out the gun. Yeah.
Also, I like how this has become a one-on-one. There's two other people, and they're apparently all in on killing you.
Yeah, yeah. They were all part of the plan, but fuck, she has a knife.
We didn't count for that. She had something sharp and pointy.
To be fair, I wouldn't get stabbed for a plot this stupid. So he places the pistol on the ground and raises his hand. I almost laughed in how intimidating I seemed, even though I only had a pocket knife, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, but you're a known murderer.
Yeah, you're a convicted killer, and a jury of your peers of children. Then I felt a hard object strike my head with immense force, and I fell over on the sand. My eyes were still opened. I closed them for a second in pain and squinted through the darkness. At first, my eyes focused on the ground below me. The ground was covered in small pebbles and rocks. Then my eyes focused on the distance. I saw the man that looked like a hermit, clutching a baseball bat, lying on the ground, chest heaving rapidly. The sun has already risen by now and framed his dirt-stained face. I looked at the sun in my confusion, as it has only just gotten dark not too long ago. Then I could barely hear him. "You got me good, kid," and his chest became still. Next thing I remember is waking up on the island in pain and bloody. I examined my wounds and believed them to be from knives. I felt the lump on my head next and winced in pain as I touched the giant knot on my skull. I rubbed my face from sweat and realized I couldn't hear. It was probably from the force of the strike, I thought, but I was later told in the ambulance that soon arrived it was probably from gunshots at very close range. But I didn't remember anything. A boat came 15 minutes later after I awoke and carried the body of the hermit man on a stretcher. They examined the freshly ground up dirt from the hole earlier, and I was curious who filled it up. Of course, that's what I remembered then. That's what I told the court when I was charged with yet more murders. I told them this whole story.
Murder Kid did it again.
I told them this whole story I've told you. They asked me a million questions, even about kindergarten and my behavior since the murder. They began questioning if that case was a murder too, but they let me free. They said they didn't have enough witnesses besides me, and the story didn't sum up with the little evidence they had left. A big storm came later that night and washed up anything forensics could use against me, conveniently. My friend Denise, I mentioned earlier, who found me the job at Burger King, suggested I go see a therapist about my recent nightmares of those days. Of course I agreed. I wanted to feel better about myself, and possibly figure, it just says, and possibly figure more about my excellent memory. So I don't know what the fuck that sentence could even be. He told me he told me it was called hyperthymesia, and it was highly unlikely that I have had it, or it would have been brought to attention earlier, or my parents would have realized. I guess,
The parents that you didn't talk to?
Ever.
Yeah.
After one session, he told me he researched information on the incidents and anything regarding my name. He felt like it was best to try a certain therapy on me to help me remember anything I forgot, even though her memory is perfect. After 2 sessions of the therapy, I went back into my memories. I remembered everything that night and what really happened in kindergarten. First, I saw myself on the playground running up the steps. My shoes were tied this time. They were tied and he didn't trip on them. Instead, Ricky reached the top of the steps, laughing and panting as he looked up at me, standing there in front of him. I looked at him with mud dripping down my face and a blank expression as I stretched my arms and forcibly giving him one hard push on the shoulders, and he fell, rolling once down the stairs and hearing the loud crunch as he hit the ground. I smiled and ran to the ground, recovering my innocent mask of concern and confusion. I wasn't at the least bit distraught. My memories delved deeper and deeper until the Foster's home. I'm sitting at a small table with my parents, and I'm drawing a picture of the boy I killed on copy paper. They're trying to talk to me, to comfort and apologize to me about what happened, or what didn't happen, how they parented me, but I wouldn't respond or listen. The same situation repeated countless times in my head, my parents reaching out for me, but I won't listen. Usually I'm drawing on a piece of paper something obscene or violent, or I'm snapping crayons and pencils in half and stabbing random things on the table. I really hope this girl gets that job at Burger King.
She sounds qualified.
You would probably get the best service. Because she is just not engaged. Like, you get bad service from people who realize, like, this sucks.
Right.
But she's just be in her own fucking world. 4 more memories come to me. My parents arriving, me appearing more sane and well-kept than before. My hair was brushed and I was smiling. I responded to them these times, answering their questions on how my month has been and what's happening in school. I would talk to them about a puppy picture I painted for art class and how I'm receiving A+s in many of my classes. They looked relieved and happy to see me back to their normal child. One memory I show them my new friend Amelia, a doll one of the ladies there gave me. Next, I see me holding hands with both my parents, in between them, smiling as large as ever. I felt me smile in real life now, this memory calming me down. It warmed my heart to see at least a couple memories that weren't regrettable. I was 12 now, and it was summer. My birthday was soon, and my parents were walking me out of the Foster's home. Was I leaving for Aunt Judith's now? The short period of happiness the memory gave me was diminished with the thought of what happened there. Next memory now, and everything is red. I'm standing in Aunt Judith's kitchen, and I'm spinning with my arms out wide, smiling. My once white socks are all almost slipping on her linoleum kitchen floor as I spin around in the red blood. There's blood all over the walls, writings I can't see as I spin faster and faster. The rooms are whirring together, and I hear the many clocks of Aunt Judith's chime 3 a.m. The sight of all the blood and sound of clocks all chiming in unison, but in different tones and melodies, overwhelms me, and I wake suddenly on the leather couch of my therapist, who is staring at me like, what the fuck? No.
Shit, she is.
No, I added that, but I tell him it's urgent. He puts me to sleep once more to possibly go before the spinning and the blood, and he continues. I fall asleep again, but this time I'm entering Aunt Judith's house without the red addition to her floor wallpaper. My parents follow behind me and act less suspicious than my memories tell me. They're communicating to me, talking to me, and I'm having pretty decent and normal conversations with them too. I see us all sit at the dinner table, feasting on a nice hot and steaming turkey that Aunt Judith's boyfriend shot out by his house, and her boyfriend sitting at our table too. He's the old man from the shack from my other memories, and he's cutting the turkey, still wearing the hermit clothes I remember, but hospitable as much as my parents. He even tells us a couple jokes containing birds and turkeys before we feast on the turkey, corn, and mashed potatoes. After dinner, we sat in her living room and watched a couple of old movies Aunt Judith had laying around, The Breakfast Club, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. We were all sitting on a couple of couches laughing and enjoying the movies like any other regular family. I wanted to be there, to take joy in the moment and absorb all the good feelings and comfort they would be giving me. They were my family, and it looked like I loved them and they loved me. Next memory, I'm lying in the guest room's bed, eyes closed, and then I hear the same chime, but this time I see through the darkness as I open my eyes. It's 1 a.m. I rise from my bed simultaneously as the clocks ring, and I remove the covers. I walk over to the bedside table and began searching it. I found a heavy-duty police-looking flashlight and a Swiss Army knife. I like that, like, your kid went to, foster for murder, but, like, you're going to let her have the knives and shit.
Yeah.
And a fucking industrial police flashlight. I didn't turn it on as I walked out the door and headed toward Aunt Judith's kitchen. In her kitchen, I ran my hands under the kitchen counters, opening drawers, and finally in a cupboard under a sink, I stopped searching. I found a shotgun. My feet patted against the familiar linoleum, and I headed for what I knew was my parents' room when we stayed there. I headed in there and cocked the shotgun and stared at the bed in front of me. I lowered the weapon after a couple seconds. It looked like I was hesitant. Then I walked to the bedside of my mother. She was facing this way, forehead exposed, where I placed the end of the shotgun. It didn't look or feel like I nudged her, but she opened her eyes from the touch of the barrel. She saw the long gun extended to her forehead, and after adjusting her eyes, she only said, "Why?" and I fired. My father jumped out of the bed, stumbling onto the floor from the sheets, and appeared disoriented on his feet before me, looking at his wife and sobbing, "Samantha, don't do anything rash, my darling." Like,
a little late for that.
That is, and again, underreaction to.
We all didn't like your mother, but don't kill me.
Well, yeah, she snored, but this isn't the answer. The same last words I heard him say in my earlier memories, and my face, just like at the playground years before, was expressionless, even inhuman, as I pulled the trigger once again. By this time, Aunt Judith was standing in the doorway, shocked by the deaths of my parents in front of her, with me holding the gun. I now have the gun pointed at her. She says nothing as I pull the trigger, and blood squirts from the back of her head onto the wall. It's just grotesque for the sake of being grotesque. Like, it's not even how a fucking shotgun blast would work.
You don't know that. Maybe it's that back of the head artery.
Yeah. And her head does the familiar jerk. Does the familiar jerk as the others before her. I could feel my muscles make a small smirk.
I hate when my muscles smirk. They're such dicks.
Yeah, they're so smug about it.
Yeah.
As I dragged the bodies into the living room, the whole time I was on this killing spree, I felt my body moving and squirming on the leather couch, but I was consistent on staying in the memory. I needed to know what happened. Now I was mutilating the bodies with the army knife I found before, opening the bodies, tearing out guts and intestines, writing on the walls illegible and meaningless scribbles. This continued for about almost 2 hours, enjoying playing with the fresh blood when the clocks chimed 3, and I was in the kitchen swirling again in my family's blood, smiling. The memory shifted, and now I'm dragging body by body onto a boat my Aunt Judith mentioned over at the dinner table. I found out how to operate the vehicle by examining the gears and began driving through the night.
The boats aren't fucking hard to use. You turn the key and then you push the go lever.
That's true. They're not hard, but if you've never driven them before, I doubt looking at the gear shift would be like, okay, I got it. It was pitch black, but the fog light made it possible to maneuver through the trees and tall grass in the swamp. It wasn't hours that it took to reach the sandbar, but it was quite a while away. I brought the bodies onto a small island and produced a shovel I must have found earlier. I dug all night. I dug until the sky almost began to lighten up. It was almost sunrise. I pushed the bodies into the hole sloppily, piling them up on top of another in awkward positions, and quickly covered my dead family with the fresh dirt. When I covered the hole, I sat on one of the boat seats, catching my breath for a minute, and then I heard a voice. Didn't expect it to be you. Of all people, why would it be you? I turned around and looked surprised. It was Judith's boyfriend. He must have heard the shots from his shack as he went home after dinner. There was a smaller boat on the side of the island. I didn't hear his boat coming as I got into mine. He was standing just in front of the new grave I dug and had a baseball bat in his hand. I remained silent with no answer. I started to move my hands in the direction of my shotgun right at my feet, away from his view. Don't reach for that gun. He raised his bat closer to me. He was now raising the bat above my head. I gave him a confused expression to deny his accusation. Don't bullshit me. I know when someone is reaching for their gun. I want you to pull it out slowly and drop it on the ground. Go ahead. This is so dumb. Just like my other memories, I listened to him, slowly pulling out the shotgun and holding it sideways. Now step out of the boat and place it on the ground. I did as he said, but secretly reached for another weapon. I felt the Swiss Army knife resting in my pocket. Before he could react or say anything, I quickly pulled the blade and stabbed him into the side several times. He gasped and winced in pain, yet he somehow managed to hit me square on the forehead hard enough to disorient me. Whilst disoriented, he dropped his bat and switched for his own pocket knife with an even longer blade that looked like one I remembered to belong to the janitor. It seemed he made this change because he was in too much pain and too weak to risk striking me again with the metal bat. He flipped out the blade and gave me a few long gashes on my side and rib cage. I gave out a yell, a couple more quick jabs from him into my stomach, and I knew I had to act soon or die. I quickly regained balance and stabbed him a few more times. Like, this is the fucking problem with these types of stories. It's just like paragraph after paragraph, and then I stabbed him, and then he stabbed me, and then I hit him.
We stopped and had tea because we were getting thirsty.
I quickly regained balance and stabbed him a few more times closer to his heart, parrying with his own knife now. He was now dropping the knife, clutching his new wounds with both hands, but he knew he was beat. I picked up my gun and shot him quickly, missing his vital organs by only a little. Like, how the fuck would you know?
Well, she poked around afterwards.
Yeah, she's a full-on fucking doctor now.
Yeah.
Alright, so missing his vital organs by only a little, but it was still fatal. He fell over immediately on his side, and I slowly let myself down on the ground as well. The bat's blow on my head made my ears ring, and I felt dizzy and sick from the impact of the metal bat on my skull. Plus, the giant bleeding wounds made me weaker than ever. His chest was heaving rapidly, and then, yeah, you know, you got me good, kid. That shit. I'm gonna skip a giant paragraph of a dude dying. I forcibly woke myself up at that point, knowing the full truth. I told the therapist everything I learned. He said I suffered from FMS, false memory syndrome, and a multiple personality disorder. FMS causes my mind to create false and new memories that didn't happen, but my brain convinces myself that it's completely true. That's why it was so easy for me to believe what falsely happened. Multiple personality disorder is exactly as its name suggests. I have multiple personalities, and not all of them are to my knowledge. Who knows how many I have? Everything I've known since I was 5 about all those incidents is wrong. Everything I told the cops and friends and family, everything was wrong. My brain told myself what happened, and that's what I believed. I killed my family, and I liked it. The end.
The end. And now I'm applying at Burger King because apparently there's no ramifications for any of this stuff.
Well, if the therapist is just like, you made that shit up.
Doctor-client confidentiality. I like that there's no... They used a plot device. Oh, there was a big storm and it wiped away all the evidence. It's like, what about the house you fucking painted in their blood?
Right. Why wouldn't that come up?
Yeah. I mean, I get that the idea is supposed to be like, we can't prove if you killed the family or if this guy did and whatever. It's like, but I think there would be tons of forensic evidence if you were pulling out people's organs and painting on the wall with their blood.
Yeah, and dancing in it and shit. Like, that's the thing. Like, it's just going for that, like, edgy, like, murder story that, like, what an ending. Like, that's what the comments say on this story is like, wow, what an ending. And I'm like,
you were the killer all along.
Yeah. So that is a little more true to what you'll mostly find on creepypasta. Like, the ones I prefer are the more, like, completely fucking silly. Like, of course,
like Ronald McDonald.
Yeah, the evil Ronald McDonald house or something. But, you know, it felt right to do one that's a little more in line with, like, what...
I get it. They're going for, like, the American Psycho story.
But American Psycho, if you actually read that book, you'll know it's terrible. And
I didn't read the book. I saw the movie, and it was terrible. But...
The movie's movie's at least entertaining because it's that, like, Christian Bale overacting shit, you know, that, like, I can watch that movie a lot.
The real American Psycho is the one that signed you to this contract, Christian Bale.
Yeah, but the book is so fucking bad because it's like you think he talks a lot about, like, fucking Huey Lewis in the news in the movie. It's like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I can't imagine that makes it more entertaining when you slow it down and put it on a page.
And then you realize, like, you're like, wow, this author isn't, like, making some great statement here. He's an idiot. So, yeah, any creepypasta writer, you're better than the guy who wrote American Psycho.
Yeah.
Congratulations. That's the non-essential podcast award for great authorship. So, yeah, that took a while, but... Your turn.
But it was worth it. Mine's about murder as well. I did want to put just a mild trigger warning because there's domestic violence, but I don't get graphic with it or actually talk any specifics. But just in case that's not your thing, we probably weeded you out with that.
Yeah, we probably fucked it up already.
Anyway, these names are all real. This first one it's perfect, but... Anyway, Girly Chew was born in Malaysia in 1963. But during a visit to the United States in the early 90s, she took a trip to SeaWorld. It was there that she would meet a doctor by the name of Girly Hossencofft, and the two quickly fell in love. So Girly and Daisy got married in 1992, and the couple moved to New Mexico, where Girly would take a job as a bank teller for Bank of America. Bank for Americans. Something about country and banking, you know, whatever. Yeah. But she'd work there as a teller while her husband Daisian continued his practice. Armand Chavez was born in Texas in 1965. After high school, Armand enrolled in medical school, though he was quickly expelled after the school discovered that he had basically forged his transcripts in order to qualify. Undaunted, Armand just changed his name to Girly Hossencofft and advertised himself as a thoracic surgeon and medical guru with degrees from the University of Tokyo as well as Cornell Medical College. One day, while visiting SeaWorld, he'd meet a woman from Malaysia named Girly Chew. The two quickly fell in love and they got married and blah, blah, blah. So basically, that's the backstory of both these people.
Okay.
It wouldn't take long for Girly to figure out that her new husband was not who he had said he was. He was, of course, not a doctor, not even remotely close to being a real doctor. And he certainly wasn't a surgeon. He did, however, make a living posing as a geneticist, and he claimed that he was suffering from leukemia, in part because it earned him sympathy. And that when you're a con man, that kind of helps when you put yourself on people's, like, sympathy radar rather than, you know, getting their guard up. but partly because it helped him sell his vitamin injections, which he claimed could prolong life and even cure cancer. Because that's a particularly common form of shitty conmanship, when you con people that are desperate because they know they're dying of an incurable thing, and you tell them, hey, guess what? I got a cure. Anyway, Girly wasn't too thrilled with her husband's fraudulent practices, but she was less thrilled with his frequent verbal and physical abuse. According to Girly's coworkers, the police had been called on at least 2 occasions. So after just 5 short years of marriage, which probably felt like 5 very fucking long years of marriage for Girly Chew, she moved out of the couple's home and filed for divorce. Linda Hinning was born in 1953 and grew up in Hollywood. Her father left when she was 11, and according to her friends and family, this left Linda scarred with emotional issues that she tried to solve with a string of boyfriends who she'd quickly become overly attached to and like place unrealistic expectations on, you know, your typical daddy issues thing. But when she grew older, she ended up finding work as a fashion model. Eventually, she started her own line of clothing and found success. In the 80s, Linda moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico. So fuck her, because I had to keep spelling Albuquerque. And
just shorten it to Al.
Yeah, she moved to Al. But she moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and by the 90s, her business was booming. She was very successful, like in the fashion world and with her clothesline. She had purchased a nice home, and she had settled down with a man to whom she was engaged to be married. She even found time to pursue outside interests, particularly her fascination with UFOs and extraterrestrial life.
It's good to have hobbies.
Yeah, well, that's very common in New Mexico because they weren't far from, you know, like Roswell and Area 51 and all that. There's a lot of UFO enthusiasts.
Which is weird because that's like where the UFOs went first, and they've never come back. And so you have to imagine they're not that interested.
Yeah, no. So during the summer of 1999, Linda attended a seminar led by a David, I'm going to say David Icke. I think it's just Ike, but I don't
Sticky
know.
Icky, they called him.
Sticky Icky. Yeah, David was a conspiracy theorist who believed that the world was being run by a shadowy cabal of secret, shape-shifting, interdimensional, pedophiliac for some reason, reptile aliens, and that most of the world's most powerful and influential people were actually these creatures in disguise.
I agree with everything you just said. So,
I think we've all like heard, or at least heard jokes alluding to this whole theory that like there's a secret alien reptilian organization running the world.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it's not true because you can negotiate with an evil pedophilic lizard monster. You can't negotiate with some of these people in government.
Yeah, like Jack Dorsey or Jeff Bezos or Trump, you know, all of them. That becoming pedophiliac interdimensional reptilian aliens would actually improve.
It would give us
characters.
A threat at least we can understand.
Right. But anyway, she attended this seminar led by this guy, and she was very like enthralled with this whole theory because it's such a plausible one. But while at the seminar, Linda met a doctor and former CIA agent named Girly Hossencofft, who she immediately found herself drawn to.
Cool.
2 weeks, and I like that he just yeah, I'm a doctor. I'm totally a doctor. Well, I'm a surgeon. Well, I can cure cancer. Oh, I was in the CIA too.
I'm rich. Desperately trying to make up a story.
And unlike my normally I'll like be pointing out these people's ages as we go. You can kind of do the math if you actually paid attention to the year, although that would be weird because I've been blowing through them. Daisian was about 34 at this point. So to believe that this guy was like a successful like ex-CIA like doctor guy, that man, he was also a good, you know, go-getter because he's pretty young. Anyway, 2 weeks after meeting Daisian at this seminar, Linda broke off her existing engagement and began telling everybody that she and Daisian were soon to be married. The problem, of course, was that he was already married. That didn't seem to dampen Linda's excitement. She couldn't stop bragging about her new soon-to-be husband, He was the man of her dreams, and she was eager to tell all of her friends and relatives about how Dazian was really a 1,000-year-old immortal reptile. Because that's what he told her. She'd push everybody. She'd try to sell Dazian's miracle, like, vitamin injections, how great they were, and that, they'll help you live forever, which is apparently related or unrelated to being a immortal reptile, which wouldn't need miracle vitamins, but whatever. She'd also say that Dazian had told her that the reptile invasion would soon be at hand, and that once they arrived, they'd select local emissaries, and that she herself would be made their new queen. According to friends, she quickly became, went down this spiral where she became more erratic and quick to temper. Basically, she was going crazy.
Just losing her shit.
Yeah, she quit bathing and changing her clothes and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, because lizards shed.
You could tell she was in a healthy place. All the while, though, things between Girly Chew and her estranged husband were growing worse. Shockingly, despite already having a new fiancé, Dazian was not taking the divorce well. Girly had confided in her coworkers that she was afraid of what he might do. She had gone to the police and even gone as far as to call the FBI and tell them that if she ever went missing, they should investigate Dazian. And then on the evening of September 9th, 1999, Girly Chew left work and was never seen again.
I think that's something we should all do, is just keep track of your enemies. Keep a list, and it'll be like your will, where it's read this in case I die. These are the people who would have reason to fuck with me.
Yeah, investigate these people first. It's very sad that she was obviously afraid for her life and just doing what she could, and then she disappeared. And given the trigger warning at the beginning, we all know where this story is going.
She killed them all.
Uh-huh. And they turned out to be reptilian.
Girly, the lizard slayer.
When Girly failed to show up for work the next day, her supervisor immediately called police. So credit to him and their coworkers for knowing she's been
a day.
Yeah, I mean, and it sounds stupid to say that, but
there are bosses though who would be like, "Well, she's fired," and does not follow up on it. It's
no, you got to imagine some of it had to do with them knowing she had been, afraid of her. But seriously though, credit to them for immediately when she didn't show up, calling police. The police went to her apartment to perform a wellness check, and of course nobody was home. But the responding officer did notice an overwhelming smell of bleach. So the crime scene team was... I can't say
everything's so clean.
Team was called. Yeah, man, nothing weird here. She is just a neat freak. They called in the crime scene. Luminol was used, and they confirmed that a very large amount of blood had been cleaned up from the apartment. Even before the scene had been processed, though, police were dispatched to question Dazian, because that's what happens when you tell the FBI and police, hey, this guy is threatening to kill me, and then you disappear.
And his name's Dazian, so you know he did it.
Right. However, upon arrival at his home, they found the door open and the place totally empty. Authorities also tracked down this Linda Henning, who was listed as a personal reference of Dazian. Although I couldn't find anything that would say specifically, what? Because that's a weird, they link the two, but all the articles said, she was a personal reference. But, a personal reference on fucking what? Did he just leave a paper behind me? If anybody accuses me of murder, here's the people to talk to that'll say I didn't do it. I don't know.
They'll all say I was in a motel somewhere.
But very quickly, this is all going on the same day that, at least from best I could tell from the articles, that she went missing. They checked his place and he was gone, which is very fucking suspicious. They figured out this connection with Linda, and so they, of course, went to her house and questioned her. Linda said she didn't know where Dazian was, but that she didn't expect to ever see him again, which is a suspicious thing to say of somebody that you kept telling everybody you were getting married to shortly. She also said she didn't know Girly Chew and had never met her.
Just imagining that scene in Indiana Jones on The Last Crusade. Dazian knows every lizard custom. He speaks 100 lizard languages. He'll blend in, disappear. You'll never see him again.
Never. Same day that all the questioning and investigations going on, a highway worker about 120 miles south of Albuquerque, bastard, again I had to spell that out,
Bastard.
Anyway, came across discarded women's clothing, a tarp, some gauze, and some pieces of tape that were all covered in blood. That's a curious thing to find along the side of the road. The police did quickly track down Dazian, who had fled to Charleston, South Carolina, where he was staying with a woman named Cheryl Culp, who, unsurprisingly, also said that she and Dazian were engaged to be married.
How does this dude? God, I don't understand how like crazy people like.
So yeah,
like it's like I was drawn to him. Then you're fucking nuts too. Like,
well, that's the thing though. Most of these people are just good at finding these vulnerable people.
Yeah, and then you tell them what they want to hear on some level, even if they weren't, they didn't go into it expecting to be told they were going to be a otherworldly princess.
Right.
You find a way to make that appealing to them.
And again, more fucking credit to Girly Chew, who, fell for this guy's like allure or charm or whatever the fuck. And then as soon as she found this stuff out, it's like, no, I don't want any fucking part of this.
Right.
So anyway, they found him in South Carolina, and they, of course, brought him back to New Mexico, where they charged him with the murder of Girly Chew. As police began to process the evidence gathered at both Girly's apartment and then the clothes that were found by the road worker, they were not surprised to find that some of the blood and hair belonged to Girly Chew, of course. But they also found blood from a second individual, and instead of that belonging to Dazian, who they assumed had killed Girly, the other sets of blood and hair DNA belonged to Linda Henning, and so they obtained a search warrant for Linda's home, and there they found hidden in the ceiling of her garage, and I quote, they found a ninja sword, not a katana, but a ninja sword.
Well, the ninja had the shorter blade, and I know that because I'm a loser.
Okay. Well, that's what they found. They found a ninja sword. They also found a shotgun and a .22 caliber pistol. The sword, it turns out, happened to be purchased the morning of Girly's disappearance.
You gotta get a weapon that'll be incognito.
And then I don't know why you keep the weapon afterwards.
Well, it's a ninja sword. You know how hard these are to find?
It's true. It worked really well. I don't want to have to find another one.
It took like 3 weeks to show up to my house. I'm not throwing it away because it'd
be pretty suspicious if I have to walk into that ninja sword store and say, hey, I need a second ninja sword now.
It's like, and those aren't real ninja swords because they don't have blood on them.
Anyway, they also figured out that Linda had lied about not knowing Girly Chew, of course. In fact, Linda was a customer at the bank where Girly worked and had multiple interactions with her during the course of business. Although I would say there's a bank that I do business with for work, where we do our deposits, and there's like 4 people that work there. So it's the same 4 people, and I'm there every other day. Yeah. I couldn't even tell you any of their first names. So if they're like, aha, you went to her bank, I'd be like, that doesn't mean I knew who she was, but
you weren't plotting a murder with their former
right. There's plenty of other evidence mounting here against Linda. So of course she was arrested for the murder of Girly Chew Hossencofft. Dazian, in an attempt for leniency, did confess to the murder. However, he would insist that Linda Henning had nothing to do with it. He claimed that he had intentionally placed her blood at the scene in an attempt to confuse investigators. Because wait, there's somebody else's blood, but they're still alive.
Wait, she could get charged? Shit.
Investigators, of course, did not buy that story and proceeded with the trial against Henning herself. Henning's defense claimed that she was innocent, while the prosecution, on the other hand, painted a picture of a woman who had fallen for and then basically been brainwashed into committing the murder by a smooth-talking con man. He had to be really fucking smooth-talking, because basically everything that we've learned about Dazian doesn't sound like...
He doesn't sound like a suave fucking Bond villain type, like... I cheated a little bit just to look up, it helps to get an image of these people. his mugshot, he is every fucking UFO Albuquerque dipshit, where he's like, he's a goofy fucking dork with a ponytail.
Right,
and
like you wouldn't look at him and necessarily be like, that's the ugliest guy I've ever seen, but he's a fucking... You can look at him and say he's a dork that lives in his mother's basement.
He is, he's not the one who's going to, like, charm you into killing someone. Or shouldn't be. Apparently he is.
So, Linda's defense attorneys, who apparently have never tried to defend anybody in court before, they hinged her entire defense on one single key witness, who was, of course, Daisy Hossencofft. When Daisy was called to take the stand, he did continue to insist that Linda Hinning, was completely innocent, and that she had nothing to do with the murder. Daisy claimed that he had masterminded the killing, but the actual murder itself was committed by a man named Bill Miller, which is like, well, where the fuck did that come from? As it turns out, police had also recovered evidence that some guy named Bill Miller had been at the scene of the crime. However, Daisian's testimony was very erratic, graphic, and psychopathic, and the jury knew his history of, his long history of being a con man. And so when your entire defense is resting on the testimony and nothing else of a guy who's known to be completely fucking insane, basically, it didn't work very well. It wasn't enough to, of course, convince the jury that Linda was this completely innocent person that just got, like, wrapped up in this weird murder plot of this con man. Especially since they were going up against, like, having bloodstains both at Linda's apartment and on the clothes found, miles and miles away. They found her hair samples in both places. They had the probable murder weapon, and proof that she had lied about her knowledge of the victim. And they'd even, like, gone as far as being able to prove that there were samples of cat hair found at Girly Chew's apartment that came from the cats that Linda owned, because Girly didn't own any cats.
You telling me the cats did it too? God damn it.
So they had all this evidence against Linda Hinning, but they also had one more thing, which was apparently during the course of the investigation, on multiple occasions, Linda Hinning had stated that she had consumed the flesh of Girly Chew, and because of that, investigators would never find the body. Which...
Gotcha.
Really sucks for me, because I cannot not point out that the victim's name is Girly Chew, and this woman says she ate her. But it's also a really crappy story for Girly, because it ended bad. But it's a really weird thing to say that you're innocent and have nothing to do with the murder, and also be like, oh, by the way, I ate her.
But yeah, and we've had stories like that before too, where it's like, like we had the acid bath murderer, and he's like, well, you can't find the bodies, so how are you ever going to convict me of murder? Bwahaha. It's like, you just admitted to murder.
It's murder, right.
Because you wrote down, I dissolved the bodies, ha ha ha, and then signed it.
Right. And it's also weird to be like, I ate some of her flesh, so you'll never find the body. It's like, you ate the bones? Like...
Yeah, You ate all of her. Okay.
Quick, get a warrant for her septic system.
And again, like, looking up the pictures, like, you find Linda, like, this fucking woman is probably 100 pounds. It's like,
well,
you did not eat the entire goddamn body. Shut up.
So on October 25th, 2002, Linda Hinning was found guilty of murder, kidnapping, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, perjury, criminal solicitation, and tampering with evidence. Though she was eligible for the death sentence, in fact, it made the case historic in that she was the first woman... God, I cannot talk tonight.
That's fine.
She was the first woman in New Mexico's history that would have been eligible to face the death penalty. She was instead sentenced to 73 years in prison. So I guess that's good. We've talked about our thoughts on...
That's one of those sentences where I'm just like, just give me life. Like,
yeah, it's weird. Like, how'd they calculate 73 years?
Like, you know how fucking old I'll be by then? Like, I don't care. Just...
Bill Miller, the guy that Daisian said committed the actual murder, and who's actually like ended up just really being a footnote in this entire story, was charged with 5 counts of tampering with evidence because they could prove he was at the scene. He was sentenced to 1 year of probation. So you could tell like who the prosecution really wanted to go after in this story.
Yeah.
Daisy and Hossencofft was given a life sentence plus 20 years, which is weird too. But the interesting thing to me there, if they sentenced her to 73 years, they sentenced him, they just said, okay, we'll just say life. Which, if he's an 1,000-year-old immortal reptile, that'll be a lot of time behind bars. I have a feeling it'll end up being a normal lifespan.
Yeah.
But Girly Chew's body was never found. Turns out in New Mexico there's a lot of desert.
Yeah, that's shitty too, because like, you know, you're born in like Malaysia and then.
Yeah, and the whole time, like the story is weird with the whole like UFO thing and this woman that just like seemed to be normal. I mean, she obviously had some like I said, daddy issues, but relatively normal and successful. That like within the span of 2 weeks after meeting this guy, just turned into one of the craziest people you could ever.
There's a lot
imagine.
of like murder couples where that happens though, where it's just like it just fucking dude flips a switch in some women, and it's like, Jesus, like she was normal and now she's completely out of her fucking mind. And like,
yeah.
Oh, we have examples of that now. I was just like reading a thing about like this, like it was kind of one of those like, it was about like modern white nationalism, and it's like these people being like, yeah, our fucking daughter was fine and now she's met this fucking Nazi boyfriend, and now she's just like always on Facebook and shit taking photos of like her with like Nazi tattoos and shit, and it's like, and that was not who she was for 40 fucking years.
And it's weird because part of you wants to be like, bullshit, she always had it in her, but probably not. Like, because you see stories like this. I doubt this woman, like her whole life was like, I'm just waiting for the perfect time to murder some random woman and whatever, become a reptile queen. But yeah, it's really weird. You wonder what is that switch like? I don't know. But that's the story of Girly Chew. And like I said, it's sad. It like there's a lot of weird things that you can get lost in and like kind of forget that like this woman, it was domestic abuse that led to her murder.
Yeah.
And if you strip away all the like con man and alien talk and this crazy woman that he met, it becomes a normal story of somebody who got in a bad relationship and paid the price.
Don't worry, but behind all this murder and stuff, he was a real asshole.
That's yeah. But what I was getting, like the whole time, like you're reading all this like weird, like I can't believe it stuff as I was going through like the story, but you're still thinking about like, God, I can't imagine her family that like, you already have that like, oh, her daughter was just visiting America and she found some guy and fell in love and she's staying over there now. And I don't know, maybe she didn't have, maybe her parents weren't alive, or they didn't really talk about that, but it's hard not to think about that and think, well, she's not coming back, but at least she found this guy, but we don't we don't know anything about him, and then be like, oh, he murdered her, and we have no recourse because we're on the other side of the world, like, so that's sucky.
It's definitely shitty. I don't know, like it does bum me out, like to, just that whole ideal of like, I'm gonna go over to there and start a new life with this man I love and shit, and then it's like, oh, he's a complete fucking con artist, and he has a ponytail, and then I gotta get out of here, and then like it all falls apart.
Although I can't help but wonder if who really, he claimed to mastermind this murder, and maybe he did because he obviously had threatened her and she was afraid of him. Or was it just this woman, once she flipped and went fucking insane and found out that that he was currently married, like, did she take it upon herself and then he was trying to cover for her? Like, I don't know.
Judging from the fact that he just fucking up and bounced. After that, I have to imagine he wasn't that concerned with, like, her shit.
Oh, that's true. Like that's true. He didn't think to stick around and like protect her. He was like, I'm going to try to get out of here. And it's like, they got me.
He even said, I tried to frame her. Like,
no, I was just trying to confuse investigators.
That's the thing. Like, why would you leave blood from anyone who would be possibly linked to you? Like,
yeah, wouldn't it make sense to try to get somebody, especially since he was posing as a doctor and giving people injections, he probably could have got some, like, just random person blood and, like, sprinkled around.
Dog blood, some.
Also, if you were intentionally placing blood to throw investigators off, would you not, like, turn around and try to clean that blood with bleach? Like,
yeah.
I intentionally left it and then also intentionally tried to destroy it.
Well, first we tried to, like, clean it with other blood. And then, like, that blood, then we're like, oh, fuck, it's double blood in here. That didn't work at all.
Work at all. We've been doing this show too long.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, some psychotic creepypasta and some depressing but weird murder for your
I'm going to have
listening
to edit
enjoyment this
mine
week.
down substantially because I'm just thinking about it now, like how long she went on about fucking. And then I put the shotgun to her head and she was like, no, not the shotgun. It's on my head. Don't do it. And I was like, I'm going to keep the shotgun on your head and then I'm going to pull this trigger. And she was like, don't do it.
I liked that. I put the shotgun on her head and somehow it was like she could feel it. She woke up. It's like...
It's like a barrel was placed on me, and I noticed.
But the more I talk about the specifics, the harder it makes it for you to edit that out. So
yeah, no, don't worry. There's a lot of padding in there. I can cut that down. And if any of you creepypasta hopefuls out there need an editor, hit me up. I'll be happy to trim your shit down a little bit. As long as I can play it on the show. So, yeah, we'll be back. We'll be back again.
We'll be back. And like I said, stay tuned. This is episode 46. Episode 50 is when we're planning to do write our own creepypasta and read it on the air. So
the non-essential horror fiction fucking disaster hour.
Yeah, if nothing else, if you just want to, like, make fun of us and have plenty of ammo to do it, that'll be the show.
Yeah. Join us in episode 50 where we fucking let you just fucking destroy all of our dreams that we have any creativity. Anyway, yeah.
Well, yeah.
Bye.